Hi, I'm Danielle Davies, and you're listening to Roar, a show that amplifies the voices of women breaking barriers, leading change, and making real impact. Keep listening for bold ideas and stories that inspire you to find your voice and make some noise. Hi, everybody. This is Danielle Davies, the host of Roar. Today's guest is Pamela Redmond, novelist, Substack writer, and creator of Nameberry. You may know her novel Younger, which inspired the TV series, but Pamela has continued exploring what it really means to age, stay visible, and keep redefining yourself. Her latest project, the one-woman show Old Woman Naked, opens a new chapter. At age 72, she's stepping on stage and exposing both the body and the story of her life. Not as a farewell act, but as a reflection on 72 years of living in a female body and refusing to fade into the background. In a way, Old Woman Naked isn't a departure. It's the culmination of everything Pamela's been writing toward, the truth about women and age, told without filters, and this time, without clothes. Welcome, Pamela. Thanks so much for being here.
So great to be here. Well, that was a great description. Can I borrow that to use for
100%. I will send it to you when we're done talking.
Excellent job, really.
Well, I love what you're doing, and I love how you've done so many things. But for this in particular, you've written novels, you've run a global brand, but now you're moving into performance with Old Woman Naked. What pulled you in this direction?
Well, the main thing was that I wanted to do something that AI couldn't do.
Nice.
That was the first inspiration. And, I own this website, Nameberry, that's based on 10 books of names that I wrote with Linda Rosenkrantz over 40 years. And it basically is a collection of my life's work, our life's work with names, where we really transform the whole culture. And then AI tiptoed in and sucked everything out, 40 years worth of content. And then they put themselves first in the search results, which means that our traffic and our revenue is cut in half in the past year. And it happened before we knew it was happening. So
it's crazy because you think about you're a writer and writers are getting, their content taken and their voices taken and their approach taken. But I didn't think of something like that. Wow, that's terrible.
And it's not just us, it's publishers of every size, big publishers that are publishing kind of factual information. It's just all been taken. And a company like News Corp, the New York Times, or HarperCollins, they can get a licensing deal with the AI companies, but we're too little. We're just 2.5 people, basically. We used to be 3, but
2.5.
And so, I have found that actually creatively inspiring this year because, we have just been forced to reinvent yet again. But at the same time, it's like, oh my God, AI really is coming. It's like, you have to be a writer too. Like, what about my dishwasher? What about the laundry? Everybody wants to be a writer. Why does AI need to be a writer? Anyway, I just feel like everything I've ever done in my life, AI is coming and trying to take away from me. So it's like, I want to do something that AI can't do. So what is that? It's something live, something personal, it's something real, it's something human, right?
Wow.
And I'm like, okay, so that means I appear somewhere in person in some capacity. So what could I do, to make people listen to me as opposed to anyone else? And I kind of said jokingly to myself, like, well, you could take off your clothes. And then I'm like, oh my God, that is a great idea.
Oh my God, I love this. I love that that's what you landed on and why. Like, you could take off because you're right. Nobody's going to look away.
Right. And it hasn't been done. And there's really a lot to say. It's like a young woman, I guess I wrote this once, if you're a pink pony girl, it's like,
yes.
You get naked all the time. I mean, there are thousands of naked young women, but there aren't any naked old women anywhere, or very few. The few that there are, everyone says, oh, did you see the Emma Thompson movie, Leo Grand, yes, there have been a few, but I actually now this is part of the show, but after I did the show, I went to the Metropolitan Museum in New York, and I'm like, all right, I am going to see if I can find any art depiction from any era of an old woman naked. Okay. So I spent like 3 hours walking through the Met, and I did not find a single one, and almost no old women at all. And then I went searching on their database, and they have a lot of results, but you comb through them, like what is really an old woman naked? Six, six depictions from all of history, as opposed to, yes, all of history, including one, a Rodin sculpture entitled The Gates of Hell.
That's great. That's great. The gates of hell. I'm gonna have to find that and put that up with this. I mean,
I'll send it to you. And so, it's like if we're feeling invisible, it's because we actually are invisible. We're invisible in the culture, we're invisible in history, we're invisible to men, certainly. And so that, when I started to really think about what it meant to be an old woman naked, what it meant to expose my body and talk about my body, I thought this is something really that nobody has ever done, that I've certainly never done. And I just felt super inspired by the whole thing. It was just, I knew it was it was like younger, it was like the baby name stuff. It's like, I know this is a great idea. And I just, boom, did it very quickly.
and so far it's just been it was a one night show. But
Well,
it's allowed.
I had never performed at all. I've done speeches, but I've never done anything resembling acting, like not even in high school. So, and certainly, have never taken my clothes off. So I thought, I don't know how I'm going to feel up there. I don't know what this experience is going to be like. Let's just do it once and see what happens. So that's what I did. And then, of course, I'm like, I love this.
Well, I love that it's like you're telling your personal story, but it's very political. Can you
Yes.
talk a little bit about that too? And not just, well, I feel like there's the invisibility, but
Yes.
there's also like a defiance aspect of it.
Yes. 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 It's sort of like, all right, you think this is ugly. You think this is unacceptable. Um, you don't want to look at it, but maybe you haven't been looking at it in the way it deserves to be looked at. And I'm saying that in a very thinky way. I didn't start out with that, formulation. But after I wrote it, I thought, you can't, if you're somebody who's 72 or 62 or whatever, you can't look at your body the way you do when you're 24. I actually have a picture of myself naked at 22. And
Oh, that was a smart move.
well, what was some like bullshit artist took this picture, and and I let him, and I never told anybody. I never told anybody, not even my husband of 33 years, not my best friends ever. It ended up in a book. I don't even know how I figured that out. And I had to order this book from Germany to get picture, which I put up behind me when I did the show. And it's like, I thought I was hideous. I thought I was so fat. I thought, whatever, I have this like gorgeous body, which of course you can see now, right? And I'm like,
I always say if I could go back, I would just cartwheel naked all over the place because I'm like what I didn't know. I mean, just even just your skin, like the firmness of your skin. I keep going. I'm so sorry.
oh, no, absolutely. That's the whole point, and then to be actually faced with this is what you looked like and this is how you felt. And on the other hand, I look at myself now and I'm inviting, 100 people to look at me too. And it's like now I'm like, I look amazing. I actually think, it has nothing to do with the reality, is that reality? the reality inside is like, wow, wow, I stand upright. I can walk, I'm still here. I'm like, I can swim, I can talk to, this body allows me to do so many things that are central to my life, which I don't think I ever saw my body and myself as merged in that way um, until I did this. So, that is personal more than political, but I think, there's some inverse relationship between how I feel and how most women feel about themselves and how society feels about you. And so once you're past menopause, you're free. I would call it free from the constant threat is not a, it's really a pejorative, but it's more like the possibility, am I going to have another baby? Oh my God, am I once that's all over and it's just you and your body is not going to, give birth to another human or, your body is just yours and the world is like, we don't want to know. We don't want to see it. There's an incredible liberation in that, which is like, you're just not, I mean, and a lot of women, you get over this hump of 50, and it's like, I'm not comparing myself to any idealized images. I don't open a magazine or go online and see tons of beautiful bodies that I compare, mine unfavorably to.
Right. I didn't even think of that. Yeah, you don't, I mean, when you're young, it's like a barrage of flipping through magazines, and you worked at Glamour, right? So it's like I mean, my goodness, you're like so bombarded with these beauty standards and all. I mean, you're right. Who do we see?
Right. I mean,
There's nobody.
women,
I got AARP and I was all excited because I saw Jude Law on the cover of AARP and I was like, okay, these are my people. But even that, you don't see a lot of women, and we're not displayed the same way, in AARP as we are in like a fashion magazine.
Exactly. So, I think that is a really interesting, doing this show. Of course, I've started talking to a lot of women about their bodies, which has been super interesting for me. And everybody has their own way into the show. A lot of young women have seen it and really relate to it or really interested to see how things unfold. Older women often feel the same way I do. It's, I have at least three women I've talked to who are around my age. I will start the sentence with, well, after menopause, you feel, and they've all ended that sentence in the same way, free, free.
I
After
love that. And
menopause,
I feel
you feel
I
free.
read your Oprah article too, where you talk about this
Yeah.
and how like you finally own it. Like it's your body. Nobody's even, I mean, there's birthing, and if you breastfed, like you are like a literal food machine. It's just I almost just said it's a nightmare. It's great, but it's also like you're not your own. You're not your own until I think you get to a certain age. And then the fact that you can own it by lack of comparison too makes it, I think, even better.
Yes.
And one of the things you mentioned about invisibility, there's another author I've interviewed, and her name is Kirsten Miller. She wrote a book called The Change. I don't know if you heard of it, or Lula Dean's Little Library of Banned Books. And in The Change, it's about three women, and they're like going through this period of time where you would think of the change, but she has them kind of transform in this sort of in a different way, in a way that's powerful. But one of the things she said when we talked is she was like, there's power in the invisibility. She's like, if they don't see it coming, like you don't know what's going to happen. Like you've got that, it's almost like an invisibility cloak in some ways.
Yes, I love that. That is the perfect way to put that. Yeah, it's people don't, especially if you're working, if you're running a business, I remember going into some meeting with another website, right? And they're all guys and they're all younger than me. And they're looking at me like, okay, I don't want to fuck her. she doesn't remind me of my wife. And I'm seeing like the wheels turn, like, what do I make of her? And it's like, mom?
Right, like where does she fit in
Yeah.
my viewpoint? What
And
do they think? Like, what are
mom
you?
is where?
That's where do you get? What do you get as feedback when people just hear the title "Old Woman Naked" for the first time?
Well, mostly for the first time, it's like, you mean you're going to be, why would you want to do that? Somebody said, like, why do you have to take off your clothes to tell this story of your body? And I think, how could I tell the story of my body without taking off my clothes? Because it's what happens at the end of the show. I'm only naked at the end of the show. And what people have said is what I wanted to happen, which is like, now that I've heard this whole lifetime's worth of stories, and the story of your body, it's almost like you actually being naked is the least interesting thing, and I can't see your body without seeing it in the context of this whole history and all these experiences, and that's how the show ends, that it's rather than an idealized image that I am all these different people and I am all these different things made manifest.
I
And
love this. I love this. I want to come. If it
thank
goes
you.
on the, please tell me. Please let us know because I want to. I have to ask you though. Forget. Okay. First of all, you're naked, so that's its own huge vulnerability. But you also never performed before, so was this like absolutely terrifying, or did it make you feel completely alive, or both?
No, both actually. I was really terrified that I was going to forget my lines.
Oh,
Um, yeah, and I thought from the beginning, like, there is no way I can remember 40. At the time it was like 45, 50 minutes. Now it's longer because I've been unpacking it. It's like there's just no way I can remember this. So I, did what I do when I do a speech, which is cards with like the topic, and then but it was that part of it was difficult for me, I would say. Very difficult, much more difficult, and probably was good because it's like it totally distracted me from the naked part. But the naked part didn't bother me at all. So
that is so great. I mean, my sister and I joke like I am so modest, and I could not like. When I joke that if I wish I could go back in time and like have my naked body cartwheeling through the streets with confidence, but still, I would still be like, but I have to put something on just because I'm was grown up Irish Catholic. Like
oh, me too, me
I would
too.
still have to put. I would still be like feel compelled to cover myself up because that's just what I do. But that would be such like a mental. I don't know if it would be a mental distraction or an anchor. Like this is the thing that's getting me through the rest of it. That I just think you did an amazing thing by doing that. And simultaneously, it's not like you're like, let me practice being naked first. You did them together. So it's pretty awesome. Um,
Honestly, I don't know. When I was 50, I don't think I would have done this. I don't think I
really?
would have. Yeah, I think I would have still been at that point seeing my body as related in some way to my young body, maybe a softer, somewhat droopier version, but I think my body has become something completely different, even though it doesn't look completely different, it feels completely different to me.
But I think that speaks to women's place. Like we're all,
Mhm.
under the men's gaze, under the
Yeah,
gaze of men, and we're described. Even just last night, my daughter said that somebody said something to her about somebody being chunky, and she corrected them, and they were like, "Well, that's just a description," and she was like, "No, like." There are other ways.
gotcha.
Use your mind. There's other ways to do this, and so I think the fact that but the sad thing is it takes us so long to kind of own our bodies. It takes us, when we are willing to do cartwheels naked or in that shape, we are kind of subjected to that male gaze or even our own inner, looking at ourselves. We react to our bodies in the way that society does. So I love that you're doing this. And now I'm going to aspire Now my kids are going to be like, no, mom, please put your clothes on. But I do think it's so powerful. And especially even as you mentioned in the going into the museums and looking for old women naked, and you can't even find them at all, but you can find old men naked everywhere.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
They love being naked.
Yeah.
Statues in Italy, they're everywhere. Um, yeah, but I also, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I hope this will be bigger than the show. That's my intention, for it to be much bigger than me standing there doing this. Like, it's a conversation, it's something that can and should be approached from a lot of different angles.
Well, absolutely, but it also ties into what you started with Jubilarian. I feel like
Mhm.
from an outside perspective. So you coined this term Jubilarian, which
Yeah.
you mentioned is actually like a Catholic terminology. I guess it was used in churches, right?
Yeah.
Interesting. To capture women celebrating this stage of life rather than fading into the background. How does that word reflect where you are now?
Well, it very much it connects exactly to what I was talking about with Old Woman Naked, which is that, after 50, suddenly you're like, wait a minute, I thought this was going to be downhill, and I'm happier and freer and more creative and more, confident. I think all these positive things do happen to a lot of women as they get older. I mean, that's certainly been my experience. So, and Jubilarian and Old Woman Naked are kind of very connected in many ways, but one of the ways is just that doing Jubilarian, which was just an impulse. I write about that in the very first Substack, which is like I was just standing in my kitchen right there, and it's like, I need to do something. Like, well, I was thinking about Mrs. Dalloway, and there is at the beginning of Mrs. Dalloway, which is all about, an older woman finding joy in the everyday, right? And there's a line at the very beginning, which is, what a lark, what a plunge, as Mrs. Dalloway, was Virginia Woolf's book, which was the basis for the Hours, as she goes out to buy the flowers herself. She's somebody who just loves the world and loves her everyday life. And and it was a beautiful day, and I was looking outside, and those words, what a lark, what a plunge, came into my head. And it's like, I need a plunge. I need a lark. I need something, that's just fun and creative and positive, and that's a risk, but not in a way that doesn't have very high stakes, let's say.
Yeah, but even that kind of joy is sort of resistance at this moment in time. You're like, I will be joyful. So there. Like Hey everyone, I've got some exciting news. I'm partnering with Louis, that's Luwi, a company that's reimagined women's health through the lens of the P word. Yep, pleasure. Because pleasure's a vital sign. It's not taboo, it's not indulgent, it's wellness. Louis Lube is more than a silicone-based formula that skips the toxins and hormone disruptors. It's the start of a movement that puts wellness and pleasure first. Order Louis Lube at getlouis.com, that's GETLUWI.com, and use code ROAR15, that's ROAR15, for a special discount at checkout.
Sometimes, I have to say, it feels a little bit like, I don't want it to be, oh, the world sucks, so I'm just going to ignore all that and go off and have fun.
It doesn't. I don't get that. I don't get that impression. It seems like you're trying to stay joyful despite what's going on, and like acknowledging that it's a little bit harder, and so like making it more meaningful.
Yeah, and you know what? I think that's a really good way to put it, and I think that that's also central to the joy of getting older, is that you do have to, you do get pleasure from knowing that the days of joy are limited, and that there's something in the show where I actually asked AI, like, when am I going to die? Here are my statistics, like, when am I going to die? And AI said that I was going to die on October 22nd, 2041. Okay. I know.
Oh my gosh, seriously?
I know. So it's like, okay, I've got, what is that, 16 years, 17 years? I can't even add it, but it feels like and I think because my mother died young, my mother died at 61, and that clock has always ticked really loudly in my ear and more loudly all the time. So I feel like, this is very precious. Today is very precious, right? And this year is, this moment, it's all this body, that does function, that is healthy, that is happy, that can still be joyous. Like it almost seems like a sin against the universe not to make the most of that.
I love how you said that. And I feel like, there are, this is really simplifying things, but there are like two sets of people. There are people who feel like you do and are like, I'm going to make the most of all of this and I'm going to find the joy and I'm going to be purposeful about finding the joy because, the reality is some days are crappy days and there are some people in the world that are crappy people. And so you have to make an effort. But then there are other people who are kind of just, you get the impression that they're sort of just waiting it out. Like, well, how long can this go on? And so I love one of the things that I feel like you have done so well is reinvention. And you write about reinvention, but you're also reinventing yourself. I mean, you just performed as on stage as an actress for the first time ever at 72. You've reinvented yourself as an entrepreneur, a performer. What have you learned? And you've also got divorced after 33 years of marriage. So that's part of reinvention. What have you learned about starting over, especially later in life, or really through all your phases?
Well, I think one big thing, especially as you get older, is that you have to get really comfortable with being uncomfortable. And a lot of, you're new, right? I mean, I think the first time I really puzzled this through was when, I always wanted to be a novelist. That was the thing I wanted to do. And I was just paralyzed because I didn't really know what I was doing. I was very much like, am I good enough? Can I be good enough? I didn't even really want to try because it made me so uncomfortable. And I took a writing class. This was in my late 40s. We were living in San Francisco, and it was with the novelist Anne Packer. And I was sitting in the parking lot outside the first class, and I was so nervous. I mean, I was physically ill. It seems crazy to me now, but I had not put myself in a position of doing something completely new that I didn't know how to do and that I really wanted to know how to do. I just hadn't put myself to the test in that way. And it was terrifying. And of course, you do it and then it's fine. But it's like I had, after so many years of being a professional writer, having success on some level, knowing what I was doing in terms of writing nonfiction books, I had to, or even short stories, but I had to go back to the beginning and sort of be a beginning writer again and let myself be vulnerable and let myself be bad at it, leave myself open to judgment that was not going to be positive, to correction, to learning. So that was a huge lesson for me at that time that really kind of became cumulative over time as I started other new things. It's like, oh, if you're going to do a new thing, you're going to feel uncomfortable. You need to be okay with that. And that's what it is. It doesn't, like, I think you can interpret those feelings as like, oh, obviously I'm no good at this. Obviously I shouldn't even try. This is too painful. I can't stand it. It's like, that's what it feels like to be new. You're supposed to be ignorant. You're supposed to not know, like you're a beginner, you're supposed to not know what you're doing.
But I
So
think so many people don't put themselves in that position after a while. We kind of get comfortable, like, and actually, really, I do see it at this age. So I'm 51 and and I'm from a small town in South Jersey. And, you see people have been working. I know a lot of people who are like, well, I can retire in this many years. And, and they're not talking about doing something else. They're talking about wrapping something up. So they're
yeah.
not talking, which maybe for them, they've got a plan and they're going to do something new and brave. But I feel like people can get kind of stuck in that, like, I'm comfortable. Things are comfortable now. We can finally afford XYZ, and the kids are out of the house, and um, less. It's less. It's more unusual to see people go for something new once we get older.
Well, I'm envious of those people.
Yes, me too. Me too.
If I had that life where I was just happy with everything as it was and I never had to put myself out there, I mean, that sounds pretty nice. Maybe I'm just constitutionally, malcontent, or I do see those years of, I always wanted kids. I have three kids. I work through my kids, but at the same time, I work part-time, and the hours that I worked, I felt like I had to make money because, I was paying a babysitter, right? And so when I finally, it took me the years until my kids were older to feel like I deserved to do something just because I wanted to do it, that I could spend some time, working on a novel that I knew was not going to pay me any money for a long time or maybe ever. So
How old were you when you wrote your first novel?
50,
You were 50 when you wrote your first novel?
50, 50, yes.
Thank you, because that's just awesome. And that's so great. I love it. I don't care if you're perpetually malcontent. I love the results because you're not defining what's over. You're not defined by what's done.
Mhm.
I actually have a friend who has younger kids. My kids are 20 and 16, almost 17, and hers are little, and she's in the thick of it, and she's exhausted, and every time she has a conference call, they're running in the room, and she said something to me earlier this year, and I was like, I'm not sure if I should do this or if I should take this chance or whatever. And she was like, what are you, crazy? She was like, you got to the other side. She's like, you're like a middle-aged white man. She was like, you're proof it can happen. And I was like, it was like such joy. I was like, I am so sorry that you're feeling like this, but now I feel great. And I was like, I do feel like a middle-aged white man. And for lack of better terms, I'm like, you just suddenly have that freedom to do what you want to do. So here we are on a podcast.
No, exactly that. And actually, in the book of Younger, this was not really a theme of the show, but Darren Star, his theme is more love and romance and work and self fulfillment, and it's not motherhood. But the book was a lot more about motherhood, and the conceit of the book was that Liza and Maggie were best friends from childhood and that they were born on the same day. Okay, this is not, Debbie Mays, our character, is kind of in the show is older and Liza is younger. Anyway, they're born on the same day. Liza's got to the other side, and is okay, what now? And Maggie is like, oh, wait a minute, maybe I do want to have a baby after all. And so a lot of what happens is the two of them kind of talk like, and Liza's like, why would you
Do
oh
it.
my God, you have no idea, like you're going into this tunnel and it's going to be a long time till you come out. And Maggie's like, I need to do this, I want to do this. You did it, you got, having children, you got a lot of joy and a lot of meaning out of that, and I don't want to miss it. So I think 40-year-old women today are often at one end or the other, and it's a very different experience.
It is. It is. And speaking of the book, I really appreciated, because again, my kids are getting closer to the age of the daughter whose name I'm now going to forget in the book. And when she comes home from Africa and she's like, the mom makes the lasagna and she's doing everything she wants. And she's like, she's setting the time aside and she's going to spend this time with her daughter because her daughter must need her. And she really wants to be there, even though she's got her own hopes and dreams and wishes and boyfriends to go see. And then she sets the table and the daughter's like, I can't eat this. And not only can she not eat it, she's like disgusted by it. So I was like, oh, what a gut punch. And it's so true, because even now my son's going to come home for Thanksgiving and I'm all excited. And there's a new movie that I wanted to watch with him. And I'm thinking, we're going to watch this movie. And he is probably not going to do this with me.
Yeah.
Much as he misses me, much as he loves me, that's not he's got his own life. And so therefore it's a big transition for everybody. And I love that you mentioned that that's a big theme of the book, because I got a lot of that out of the book too. I was like, oh, this is really, that motherhood piece is a big part.
Yes, I
And
think
that guilt and like, they own me kind of thing is a big part too, because they do. You are at their literal beck and call.
yes, yes. It's an awkward time because it's also kind of the end of being a mother in that caretaking way, so you don't want to rush it too much, but
Right. I know. If my son calls me in like the middle of the night, he goes to school in Hawaii. So if he calls me in the
oh
middle of the night,
wow.
I'm like, I have to take this call. Like, he wants to talk to me. This is a special time. This will not happen forever. So there I am. But it is, yeah. So you want to hold on, but also women have a different kind of transition, I think, than men. But back to what you were saying before about putting yourself in these uncomfortable positions. A lot of people are uncomfortable, and then they're uncomfortable that they're uncomfortable, and they're like, I think I'd just rather not. And
Yes.
even if it's something really small, from getting in the pool in the summer and you're like, I just don't want to. It's uncomfortable. I have to get wet. The water's cold, etc. Then I got to dry off, take a shower. There's a lot of tasks. I'm a very lazy person. So I'm always like, I got to look at the benefit to risk, it has to outweigh. But how do you keep the momentum going for yourself to continue to be uncomfortable? Because you've been being uncomfortable for a while.
I have I have been being uncomfortable for a long time. Well, you realize, once you do it, it's like anything like that there are rewards on the other side that are worth, that the discomfort is temporary, that you move through it and you get to another place that's really valuable, which is, a new kind of confidence, all these new things that you learn and become proficient at. And it just, it's funny what you said about swimming, because I've become a swimmer in the past few years, just in my first time in my life. And every time I get in the pool, I feel that every time, every time I sit down, and every single day when I start to write, I feel the same thing, which is like, oh, I can't do this. Oh, it's horrible. Oh my God. So I've started to do this thing where I get into the pool in the first lap. I say to myself, I'm swimming, I'm swimming, I'm swimming, just to, get myself that you're in the thing that you're uncomfortable with. And you don't need to do any more than that, but just let yourself feel uncomfortable. If you can get the length of the pool feeling uncomfortable, you'll feel less uncomfortable. And then you can progress, and you can let other things in. So it's a passage. It's not a wall.
Quick pause to invite you into the Roar community. Roar's all about amplifying women's voices, and you can be part of it. I share the messy, unfiltered, behind-the-scenes stuff in my emails, things you won't hear anywhere else. Sign up at listentoroar.com and get in on the real talk. And hey, if this episode hit home, don't keep it to yourself. Share it, drop a comment, or pass it to that one friend who needs to hear it. Every share helps bring more women's stories into the spotlight. All right, let's get back to the episode. So it sounds like you still get uncomfortable. That part doesn't really get easier, but you learned how to get through the discomfort. That the habit of being discomfort has become easier. Did I say
Right.
that?
It's not a permanent state, I think is what I'm saying. It's like, I think if you don't let it stop you, you can get to the other side of it. You still feel it, but there's something valuable on the other side of it that you're not going to discover unless you go through it.
How do you keep doing it now? Like, are you planning other new uncomfortable things besides continuing your one woman show and Jubilarian?
No, I think that the one woman show is pretty much enough for right now.
Well, I was like, is there skydiving in your future? I mean, honestly, being naked in front of a crowd is some people's worst fear in the world. Like,
Yeah.
people have dreams about being naked in front of a crowd. They have nightmares about it. So it's technically, you really could do anything.
Yeah, yeah. Then as I said, the naked part is not central to this for me. It's more, the emotional nakedness is scarier to me. So I have never written about my life in this intimate and honest way. I've been a novelist. I've been cloaking everything in character and story. I've been inventing a lot, but in the invention is the reality. So it's much scarier to me to write about myself so honestly, to
Can you
read.
tell us actually a little bit about that? Because, like, for somebody who's coming and they're like, oh, I watched Younger, I read the books, I love them, and now they're coming to see your one woman show. How does it differ? You're talking about your life. What kind of stories are you including?
Yeah, I'm talking about my life, but and I mean, it's the whole thing is stories that I really have never told anybody. I mean, it's really a lot of the stories that have always felt from different parts of my life so shameful that I couldn't talk about them. Um, it's funny, the Catholic thing, there's something in the section about childhood where I was, my friends and I pulled down our pants and just kind of looked at each other, and we would do this, and I would be like, oh my God, this, I was so consumed with shame. Like this is
You're
like,
going straight to hell.
oh yeah, I know this is wrong. I know it's a sin. I don't know which sin, but there are all those sins with words in them that I don't really like, adultery and covet. So it's like I have to confess. And I actually went to confession. And I do this in the show. I actually, Janice Maffei, who produced the New York shows, had this idea that I should kneel down as I did it and do my confession, which I remember in vivid horror.
Oh my God.
And I said to the priest, I did bad things with my friend. And the priest said, what kind of bad things? And I'm like, what kind of like what? Like my head exploded because I never like imagined that there was any other kind. And then he's like, and of course the perspective that we have now in priests, right? He's like, touching. And I'm like, touching? Not even a thing.
It's so innocent. It's such an innocent, like, memory of that. It reminds me of being a little kid and somebody saying, I know what the F word is. And I was like, fat? Like, you just have no idea what's going on. And that
Yeah.
anything could be any worse.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I remember seeing written on the sidewalk Fuck and coming home and asking my father what that meant, and he slapped me across the face. And it was the only time that had, my father was a very gentle guy, and it was the only time that happened, but that was the only response. So it's like, okay, that's bad. I don't know why, but it was like there was this whole misty world of bad things that I didn't understand, and I didn't know like why are they hiding. Anyway, I always had the feeling that there was something big that the adults were hiding, and I was right.
You were right.
Right.
You were right. But I love that that's the kind of story and everything is about your body and the things that have occurred in, around, and to your body in your 72 years.
Yes, exactly, exactly.
Oh,
So
awesome. And
very, it's the vulnerability. You did really say that very well, and the nakedness and the vulnerability emotionally and literally. I think that's what happens. And the emotional, literal, I mean, the emotional, psychic nakedness feels much riskier to me, and than the physical nakedness.
well, even in, your, I'm just trying not to give everything away or anything away. Not that I've seen it, but even in the Oprah article, you wrote something about sexual partners and talking, reminiscing with your friends, and one of them said something like, or a few of them said something like, I only remember the date rapes.
Right.
And it's
Yeah.
like, those are, first of all, that sentence alone, they really should have just pulled that out as like the thing to make you read. Talk that you don't have to be naked. You could just say that. That line would also get people's attention. But that's so telling about women and you know, our lived experience and where we are in this universe and how the universe responds to us. But I would imagine that hearing you tell these kinds of stories, not saying that that's your story, but anything in relation to those, what was the audience reaction? Like, what did people say to you afterwards?
You know, I I feel immodest saying this, but people were blown away. They really were. You know, it's like everything that I hoped would happen happened. You know, I mean, people laughed a lot because it's funny, but you know, people cried at the end. I didn't cry at the end, but I was afraid I was going to because the last line would always make me burst into tears. I won't tell you what it is. I have
No,
to.
don't tell me. Don't tell me.
But it's, you know, I think that people, it was like a, I don't know, wormhole is sort of a really ugly word, but it was, you know, I think there must be some word in physics or something for like, is it black hole or is it some portal? It opens some portal for women, I think, to go through and think about their own physical experience in a way that they hadn't before. Because the things I was talking about were particular to me, but there was at least one thing for everyone that it's like, oh my God, that happened to me too. And I also have never told anybody. And now I'm feeling this commonality. You know, one of my fantasies of what could happen with the show, I was imagining, I think in practical terms, this would be hard, but I was imagining like this audience. And when I did the show, there were 100 people there. Okay. And, you know, the things I talk about, like the date rapes, you know, I was imagining like little flags in front of everybody or hair ties or hats or whatever. It's like, okay, if you've been date raped, put up a red flag. You know,
Oh,
if you were a kid and didn't, when you were a kid, if you didn't know you had a vagina, which I didn't know, I just thought it was a crack, you know, nothing underneath, like put up a white flag, you know, put up, and I mean, everybody would have a flag. And I would guess that many people would have many flags because these are things that have not been spoken or revealed or discussed, but they're really universal.
yes, and I think the flags are a great idea. Can you do that? And I think I think that's a great idea because it also would make everybody in the audience feel so comforted. Like not just for you, but you know, it's not just two people in isolation who've had these experiences. It's
Yes.
women. It reminds me a little bit of the Me Too movement and how, you know, you'd be reading these stories and you're like, you read some horrible story and then there's a million people like, me too, me too, me too. It happened to me too. And that was specifically about sexual assault, but all of these stories that you're mentioning, especially if you were raised with families who are like a little bit more closed-lipped about about your body or about your body's place in the world, I think it would get so much universal appreciation from all the people watching it. I think that would be great. I love the flag idea. And, you know, you talked about someplace, one of the things that you wrote talked about the idea that this could be um, a revolution, almost a revolutionary. And I know you just said you're being immodest and this is a really big goal, but why not? What would that look like to you if that kind of revolution gathered momentum?
Yeah, you know, I've been thinking about that a lot. You know, how do you unpack this and what else can it be? As I'm writing a new draft, it needed to be longer anyway. It was like 45, 50 minutes, and I knew it needed to be 60 to 70 minutes to be a commercial play. Um,
Okay.
and I have a new framing story. And you know, I mean, in terms of reinvention, I'm much more comfortable with rewriting and re-envisioning now than I used to be. and expanding. But it's kind of like it always feels to me like, yes, it's a piece. It's a piece that's meant to be spoken. And it can also be something written. But what else is it? I went to this I've been, educating myself and seeing a lot of one-person shows, which is, not something that I ever focused on before. I saw What the Constitution Means to Me. Did you see that?
Oh,
Well, it's amazing.
I
Heidi
mean, I'm here in South Jersey. I don't get out much, but I really need to.
on HBO or Netflix or something. There was a video version of it made, and it's really great.
Oh, good.
There's another one called Down on Your Knees about blowjobs that was a sensation, which I saw with my daughter in the city a couple of years ago. And that one was very popular. And I've been watching Mike Birbiglia, who's really great at, telling Catholic boy, really great at telling these stories that kind of unfold in this elliptical way. I really admire him. I love David Sedaris. I'm like, worship.
Him I have seen, and I do absolutely. I love him. I love him.
Yes. So all these things feel like more like new models for me, like that's my role model. Not like I think I'm going to be that good, but that's where what I'm aspiring to. But anyway, I saw a one-person show in LA by a writer named Ed Schmidt, and he lives in Brooklyn, and he does these performances in people's homes. So you buy a ticket. Yes, he's not young. He's like 60-ish. You buy a ticket and they don't tell you where it is. And you just, a few days before they give you the address and you show up and there are 12 people sitting around a table and the table is full of objects. And he comes out and he is a character named Edward. So it's kind of like an alter ego, but from a different era. It's that part is, for a named person, a little bit confusing, but, and then each audience member hands him an object one by one, and that determines in what order he tells the story. Anyway, I love that. I loved it because, isn't it great? I mean, I loved it because it broke the paradigm, and it felt like, I think I would be less comfortable getting naked in a room with 12 women, just 12 people sitting around a table. But it made me have this fantasy of 12 women sitting around a table. There's something called a Jeffersonian dinner. Have you ever heard of that?
No, but you're exposing me to all kinds of new things. Tell me about that.
We have to have one. So a Jeffersonian dinner is when this is something that Thomas Jefferson really did. And I think he did it with like political events of the day. So he would invite people to dinner and there would be a topic like, the economy or something. I'm picking something really boring. But I did this once on my birthday and the topic was birthdays. And everybody had to come prepared with a 10-minute story, 10 minutes tops, about anything to do with birthdays. And you go around the table and each person tells their story. And then we all discussed. And everybody showed up grumbling about this. This is stupid. I don't want to do this. And it was like the best dinner I have ever had. Each person came at it in a very individual direction. Everybody got to know each other in this really intimate way. Anyway, so I was imagining a Jeffersonian dinner like this, where each woman would tell an intimate story about their lives, their bodies over their lives, and they would have to take off one thing. So it doesn't, you don't have to take off your bra. You could take off your sock or, whatever. Right. But I thought, that sounds interesting. I don't know. I think
that does sound interesting. I love that idea. I almost like you could almost have it up there with you. See, now I'm going to just start brainstorming. Like you could almost have that as, another portion, like they're sitting there and they can plug in. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm a theater minor, so these ideas have to come out somewhere.
I am so glad I met you. I think
I'm a wealth of information. Well, all these things you did, even the names like Nameberry. I feel like there's just a through line for you. Do you feel like there's a through line for you in your work?
For a long time I didn't. I was like, what? how do all these things connect? I would actually meet a lot of people who would think that I was two different people, especially when my name was Pamela Redmond Satrin, which is a much more just, a singular name. People would be like, oh, I thought there were two Pamela Redmond Satrins. That seems incredibly unlikely to me. But I think less unlikely than that one person would do two such different things as names and novels. But my friend Kate here in LA, who is going to produce the show in LA, is like, oh, I know what the through line is. It's identity. And I'm like, that is brilliant. That is, yes, that's it. The through line is identity. The through line is reinvention. And the through line for me as a creator is doing something in a different way than it's ever been done before, but in the way that it should be done, in something that I think the goal is like something that's both original and natural. That's like the holy, that's
The holy grail of creativity.
Yeah.
Well, I think you're doing it. I have one last question for you, but I could talk to you all day. You're going to be like,
you're so great at this. Oh my God.
Thank you. Thank you. I have to tell my mom. You wrote your first novel at 50, and I don't mean to keep hemming and hawing on this, or I don't mean to keep coming back to it, but you also were divorced after 33 years. And I'm imagining, is it around the same time?
No, I was 61 when I got divorced. And that was not coincidentally the age my mother was when she died. So, yeah.
We could have had a whole episode on that.
Yeah. So 50, I wrote my first novel. 55, we launched Nameberry, which, was going from writing books to creating a website. I mean, we had no idea what we were doing. And 60 is when Younger got sold to TV. So, yeah.
Okay, so it actually is even better. So if you could go back to before you ever wrote a novel, if you could talk to this person that you were before you even wrote a novel, where it was just a dream, and you were like, is it going to be any good, or do I do it anyway? Even accepting the fact that it might, many people write novels and they're in many drawers across America, and that's it. And you've actually had not only a successful novel, but it was turned into a TV show. If you could look back and talk to that woman who was at the time raising kids, married, not doing the dream that you had, what would you say to her?
I think the thing I would say is, don't give your power to other people. I was so fixated on, when you say, is it any good, right? I was so fixated on other people judging whether my work was good or not, that I couldn't judge it for myself. And it very much relates to the old woman naked, sex, relationships. I was always fixated on, oh, does he like me? Is he having a good time? I wasn't able to judge it from the inside out. And I would say that's something that only recently I've really understand in a really deep way. It's like, what do you have to do to get that feeling in yourself? That certainty is like, I know this is good and I don't need anybody to tell me anything. And that takes a long time to get to, but I feel that way now. I work a lot harder on my writing now than I ever have in my life, rewriting again and again and again, and really like just looking for that feeling of excitement and certainty that this is it. And you don't need anybody else to tell you, it's like you don't need anybody to confirm that feeling. And I wish I'd been able to get to that when I was young. In all kinds of ways, in my writing and, in my life, in all kinds of ways.
Well, I love it. And I love that you did it now. And the last thing I'll say is, in the Jubilarian also you wrote, which everybody's obviously going to have to read because I've read because I keep talking about it. But you wrote I think it's How to Be 90, or
Yeah.
And how you have a model, like a model for it. And I think everybody needs that, right? We all need to see how other people are doing it and how it can look. And it doesn't have to necessarily look like, packing up your bags and heading for the hills. It can look like reinvention and daring and creativity and confidence and doing something new. So I thank you for, how to be 72 because you are knocking it out of the park. So thank you. I appreciate
Thanks so much, Danielle. Thank you. Boy, this
it.
has been really good for my ego. Thank you.
Wait till we hang up. No, I'm kidding. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
That's it for today's episode of Roar. I hope you enjoyed Pamela's honesty, humor, and hard-won wisdom as much as I did. Next week, we're heading somewhere totally different, but deeply needed. My second to last guest of the season is Lisa Field, the founder of Lucky Star Art Camp. If you've ever fantasized about running away to the woods with a bunch of creative women, eating gorgeous food, making things with your hands, and remembering who you are outside the chaos, well, Lisa basically built that place. Our conversation is all about what happens when women step out of their everyday lives and into a space that's actually designed to refill them. Before you go, an FYI, you can grab a free copy of the Roar Rolodex. It's a curated list of women-centered resources worth knowing right through the link in the show notes. It's completely free. It's packed with the tools, communities, and voices we talk about on the show. And so it's also live and it'll be always added to. If this episode resonated, please subscribe, leave a rating, share it with a friend who'd love Pamela's work. It helps Roar reach more women who need these conversations. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week.